Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Thursday, June 6th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news and answer a question in the mailbag. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello, folks.
Okay, it is dead out there for news right now, but we do have three stories to talk about today. Let's start things off with Swamp Thing, which has been officially canceled 1 week after its premiere on the DC Universe streaming service. HT, what is going on here?
So after it was beleaguered by reports of a troubled production and reduced by 3 episodes, Swamp Thing has been officially canceled by DC Universe merely 6 days after it aired its first episode on May 31st. But the first season will air in its entirety on DC Universe. The show just has not been picked up for a second season. This was first reported by Geeks Worldwide, but we were able to confirm this with DC Universe. And yes, this is something that has in the past been reported to be because of creative reasons, but it might actually have to do with North Carolina's tax rebates policies, and basically comes down to an issue of bad paperwork. Apparently, North Carolina promised the production of Swamp Thing a $40 million tax rebate, but due to a paperwork error, it turned out to be $14 million. And so the very expensive production for Swamp Thing could not maintain that quality for the next season, and basically they pulled the plug.
Here, whose paperwork error was this? The production or North Carolina?
We don't know, but that seems to be what's being reported at the moment. It just seems to be some sort of production error.
That must be the most costly paperwork error in Hollywood history, right? Like that's like $30-something million. That's insane. How is this happening?
I don't know, but according to the first reports of North Carolina raising its rebate cap, TV shows were capped at $12 million per TV season. So I don't know how $40 million was promised in the first place.
Yeah, that's a lot. Chris, do you think this means the end of Swamp? This being the first major production canceled on DC Universe, do you think the others are going to follow, or do you think this is just like a case on its own?
It's certainly not a good sign for DC Universe. I don't know if they're going to shut down everything at once, but they might reconsider this original programming idea and just stick to stuff that already exists, like the comics they have. I don't know. I just don't. I don't know who watches DC Universe shows. I never hear anyone talking about them, so I don't know if anyone even cares.
Well, eventually Warner Brothers is going to create their own streaming service, which we assume is going to include all these DC Universe shows, and I'm sure I'll watch them then. I'm just wondering, how do you guys feel? I feel like when Netflix announced that all these Marvel shows were being canceled, I stopped watching. The ones that I was watching, I stopped watching because, what's the point? It's being canceled before, without an ending determined by the showrunners. HT, how do you feel? Is it even worth diving into a show like this, like Swamp Thing, knowing that there's not going to be any more after the season?
I mean, I can't say how much interest I already have in Swamp Thing.
But I'm just saying in general, if there is a show that you're watching and the next season is canceled, do you even watch it?
That's true. Why break your heart if you already know it's going to be broken at the end?
Yeah.
It depends, honestly, on how much critical praise that show is getting and whether it's worth that one season. But yeah, it's honestly sometimes just not worth the effort.
Yeah. Okay, I mentioned Warner Brothers, and it seems like Warner Brothers is one of the two big contenders for J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams is trying to find a new home. He was at Paramount. There was a bunch of contenders, including Disney. It seems like Disney might be out of the mix. Chris, what do we know?
So it's coming down to Warner Brothers, or Warner Media to be specific, or Apple, which is surprising because, like you said, we all sort of just assumed it would be Disney because Disney owns everything, but they're not even in the they're no longer in the conversation. It looks like it's just Warner's or Apple, and like Sony is a possibility, and maybe Universal, but no Disney. So
do you think it's that Disney doesn't need J.J. Abrams? Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't need to bid highly on J.J. Abrams because they have Marvel, they have Star Wars, they have Disney, they have Pixar. Like, do you know what I mean? They have everything. Like, do they really, like, they have so many release dates that, like, they have a film coming out, like, every couple weeks or something.
I mean, you could always have more, Peter. You can never have enough. You could always own everything. I don't know. But yeah, that might be the reason, or maybe they just, maybe they don't really want what J.J. Abrams is offering. I mean, so, it could be various reasons.
Yeah. Who do you think J.J. Abrams should end up at? Like, what is the better prospect here, Warner Brothers or Apple?
I'm going to say Warner Brothers just because, they have a tried and tested history, and, Apple, based on that presentation they gave for their upcoming streaming service, doesn't look that exciting. It just seems like Warner Brothers is the safer bet, but at the same time, Apple seems more in the future, I guess, because it's like, we're bringing our thing to a streaming service, and he might be drawn to that. But I'm going to just guess Warner Brothers is going to win out in the end.
I mean, Abrams does have a long history with Apple. He's a big fan of Apple. If you've ever watched his TED Talk back in the day, he talked about the Apple design aesthetic and how that inspires him. So I could see him ending up there. I mean, Apple needs him a lot more than Warner Brothers needs him. HD, where do you think he's going to end up?
I was leaning more towards Warner Brothers too, but you make some good points about Apple. But for now, I think Apple still is pretty untested, so I don't know what being under their leadership would mean. But they are trying to get as many big names as possible, as shown with the Apple TV Plus streaming platform.
Yeah. I wonder if he ends up at Warner Brothers, if that means that they'll let JJ dip his toes again into, like, the DC film properties.
Mm-hmm. That'll be interesting.
Because I know we've talked about it in the past. He did write that Superman script. What was it called? Superman Flyby? Was that it? Chris, do you remember?
Yes, it was Superman Flyby.
So maybe if he ends up there, maybe there will be a J.J. Abrams produced DC film. Who knows? Okay, anyways, let's move on from DC to Marvel. It turns out Marvel is adapting some of its longtime iconic comic book stories into audiobooks. HT, what do we know?
Marvel Entertainment has teamed up with audiobook and digital content producer Dreamscape Media to adapt some of their most iconic stories into, quote, read-to-me style audiobooks. They're going to be adapting around 24 of these comic book stories, such as The Ultimate Spider-Man, The Ultimate X-Men, X-Men Codename Wolverine, and Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, with several more stories along the way. And these will be released on a variety of platforms, including Amazon, Audible, Apple Books, Google Play, Overdrive, and for library use members through an app called Hoopla, which has partnered with Marvel before to bring 250 comic books to its apps. So this is Marvel's latest foray into audio after it released its podcast drama, Wolverine The Long Night, and its second season, Wolverine The Lost Trail. But those are more audio dramas, whereas these audiobooks sound like they're more akin to just like typical audiobooks, which will be interesting considering, comic books are very visual mediums. So I wonder how they're going to adapt those for just being read.
Yeah, I'm a little cynical here. Part of me is excited about this because I don't have the time as much to read comic books, and I do have a lot of time walking around and listening. I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of Audible. But the other part of me is like comic books. Those comic book tales were created for the comic book medium, which is highly visual. Sure, you can adapt those into like animated direct-to-DVD movies. Like that makes sense. That translation. But Chris, does this make sense? Like, are we gonna like follow along to a big epic comic book fight like descripted in words? Like, that just seems...
I'm guessing, I haven't listened to them, and I'm guessing they'll have like sound effects, like swords clashing if people are sword fighting. I don't really know if it's going to be like an audio. Is it like an audio book, as in the traditional sense, or is it like an audio play? Because well,
the line is blurred there, because if you listen to some audiobooks, like you listen to like the Harry Potter or Star Wars books, there's like music and there's voices and there's sound effects. You hate that?
I don't want it. I want a book. I hate when they add goofy sound effects and music. I don't want that. I just want to hear someone reading. That's it. That's all I want.
What about when people do voices, Chris?
I don't mind the voices. I don't mind the voices if they're like good voice actors. A bad narrator can really ruin an audiobook. Like I tried to read, quote unquote, the first Game of Thrones book once on audiobook, and the narrator was this old man, and like every time he read like the sex parts, he had this like withered voice. I was like, this is like the worst. I couldn't even finish it. I was like, I can't get through this. And so I gave up on Game of Thrones.
That's hilarious. My God.
Have either of you listened to the Harry Potter audiobooks? Because I feel like those are the best case scenario of what I'm describing, like almost like an audio drama.
I actually haven't, but what you're describing is akin to what I'm listening to with the Lord of the Rings audiobook right now, which is more of like an audio drama. There's music and there's sound effects, and it's the score actually from the movie, so it makes it kind of brings that nostalgia too. But I maybe might check out the Harry Potter ones, although I don't usually listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Yeah. So I guess you're out for the Marvel adaptations?
Yeah, I don't really see the benefit of listening to these comic books as audio books, because I just don't think that they'll capture everything. I might be proven wrong. They may find some sort of ingenious way of incorporating that, but I don't really know for now.
But I imagine, HT, you live in New York. I imagine that you're like on the subway all the time and you're like
very
walking
hard to
through.
Hear things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the subway's very loud, and like sometimes, the audio you can't really hear the full effect of things.
So what do? Listen to music?
Yeah.
Or listen to the people around you? Who does that these days?
The music of life.
I just don't understand how you're going to translate like one of those huge like multi-page splash pages into an audio book. Like how do you even describe something like that? Yeah,
I don't know. But on the plus side, this probably would be good for people who are visually impaired.
Good point. Okay, we're going to move on to the mailbag. For this, we're going to bring on Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Okay, hi. We have a letter here from Bryce from Utah, and he proposes this interesting question, a theoretical question. If you were stuck on a deserted island with solar power, a TV, and a specific set of Blu-rays from only one director's filmography to watch for the rest of your life on this island, who would it be? Well, first of all, if we only had a TV and Blu-rays, we would have no way to watch the Blu-rays.
You need a Blu-ray player.
Yes, but I'm assuming in this theoretical scenario, we would have a Blu-ray player. When I was thinking about this question, I did some searching. I was like, you know what? Maybe I wouldn't pick one of my favorite directors. Maybe I would pick a director that has a huge filmography that I have not explored. So I did some searching, who is a filmmaker who has directed the most films? And there's some filmmakers that have directed 300 or 400 films, but that includes short films, and they're usually at the early end of the cinematic era of films. So I don't know. In reading into them, I'm like, maybe I don't think I would want to be stuck with their films for the rest of my life. So I think I rescinded. I'm going to go with one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I think I'm going to go with Steven Spielberg, just because he's brought me so much joy throughout my lifetime, and he has such a varied amount of varied stories, from these really heartwarming to serious. I feel like there is a scope there that I could live with, and he does have a lot of films. Do you know what I mean? It's not just a few films. If you were going to pick Tarantino or Paul Thomas Anderson, you have many less films to deal with. I feel like Spielberg is the happy medium for me. HT, how about you?
That's a smart answer. I just thought immediately of which director I would want to watch the most, and which I already watched the most, and that's easy. That's Hayao Miyazaki. He is my favorite filmmaker, probably. No, not probably. He is. And the most formative one for me in how I just kind of came to love movies. And he also has a wide scope, though not quite as extensive as the filmography as Spielberg, but his films, though all animated, range from action to smaller dramas, to fantasy to sci-fi, and those are all films that I could watch over and over again and would never get sick of. So Miyazaki for me, although I would be a little sad to not have the entire Studio Ghibli collection, but this is my immediate answer.
See, I feel like before I get deserted on this island, I would want to talk to you, HT, because I feel like there's probably some filmmaker outside of Miyazaki that makes animes and probably has a huge filmography that I have not even dipped my toes into. I feel like I would want someone I could explore new stories with. I think I've seen almost every single Spielberg film at this point. I might be missing one. But I don't even know who that would be. Is there a hugely prolific filmmaker in anime that is outside of Miyazaki? Someone that's been doing TV and movie. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there is another. Who is the director for Neon Genesis? He has done quite a bit. Hideki Anno. He's directed quite a few movies as well as live action films too. He directed Shin Godzilla, which Jacob talked about earlier. So you'd get not only animated films but also live action films. As far as anime filmmakers, there isn't quite one with the large filmography as Miyazaki. I would recommend Mamoru Hosoda, who has maybe 7-8 films, and they're all excellent. He has made films I don't know if you've heard of these. Well, one of my favorite films, which is The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, and other films like Wolf Children and The Boy and the Beast, all of which have some similarities to Miyazaki, actually, but are much more sort of screwball and funny bent to them. And the animation style of his is very different. It's more fluid and a little bit less specific. But yeah, there's a lot of anime filmmakers. Even I haven't dived into all of them. Makoto Shinkai, who directed Your Name, of course, although his filmography is very small. He's only done I think 4 feature films, but a lot of shorts. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's so many. There's plenty that I'm not thinking of immediately either that are not just anime, but foreign filmmakers who have definitely had a lot of films. But yeah, this is my number one choice for now.
You know, that makes sense too, because I wasn't even thinking properly, because in the animated medium, it takes a lot longer than live action to make a film. So those filmmakers probably would have a smaller filmography than live action filmmakers.
Yeah. I'm not gonna to drag this out any longer, but there haven't been a lot of prolific anime filmmakers before Miyazaki. He kind of started the trend of that auteurist approach to anime films. A lot of anime films before him were directed by sort of TV, journeyman directors, and there isn't quite a lot of filmmakers who are known just for doing anime films.
Okay, let's move on to Chris. Chris, where did you fall into this? Do you want the scope? Do you want something you love? Did you?
Well, I guess my first question is, do we have food on this island, or am I slowly dying as I watch these movies?
The only food you need is cinema.
Am I delirious and slowly going out of my mind as I watch all these movies?
I imagine it like Castaway. So we have coconuts and we're hunting for chickens and stuff like that. Well, I guess not you, because what would you do, Chris? Because you have chosen to not eat any meat of any kind. What would you do in this scenario? Would you have to relent and give in?
No, I don't know. I'd eat some sand, I guess. Some delicious, nutritious sand.
You live
for
on
roots and
berries,
berries.
Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I would probably just lay down and die, honestly. I'd be like, I've had a good run. It's time to throw in the towel here on this island. I don't know. I'd probably go with, I guess, like Martin Scorsese, just because he's my favorite filmmaker and he has a lot of stuff to choose from, and it's all very different and good. I mean, it's not the most feel-good stuff, but honestly, I'm stranded on an island, so I don't think I'd feel good to begin with. I don't want to be outside. That sounds awful. I want to be inside. I don't.
Well, I imagine you, Chris, like in some kind of cave with this TV, and then the wire goes out to the outside of the cave for the solar component of it to power it.
Yeah, I
What
could
if we were
probably make that work.
What if we were to take the similar premise and be just like you're stranded in a cabin and there's no way for you to escape, but it's deserted all around you, and you only have this solar power and TV and the Blu-rays.
I mean, that's why do I have to be stranded in this scenario? Can I just go home?
Scenario.
I just want to go home.
Ben, how about you? Where do you fall in the line of this?
Man, I thought a lot about this, guys. I came up with I think 5 different answers here. I was trying to think about old filmmakers that had a huge breadth of types of different types of movies that they made across their bodies of work. So I was thinking of people like Michael Curtiz, who made Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood and Yankee Doodle Dandy and Mildred Pierce and White Christmas and Casablanca, all in one guy's filmography. That's kind of incredible. And similarly, somebody like George Cukor, he was uncredited on both Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, but he directed movies like The Women and Philadelphia Story and Gaslight and Star is Born, and he's got a Romeo and Juliet adaptation in there. Somebody like Billy Wilder might also be a good choice. He did Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard, The Apartment, The 7-Year Itch, Witness for the Prosecution, The Lost Weekend. The first person that came to my mind actually was Sidney Lumet, who his first movie was 12 Angry Men, which is incredible. If you've never seen that movie, please go watch it. He also did Network and Dog Day Afternoon, Murder on the Orient Express, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, and this movie that called Death Trap that I really like. But I think ultimately my choice is Rian Johnson, who I think is my favorite working filmmaker right now. I think right now he's 4 for 4 with Brick, The Brothers Bloom, Looper, and Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Wait a second, Ben. You could live the rest of your life just watching those 4 films. So
listen, here we go, Peter. Here we go. So he's got Knives Out coming out this year, and my question to this person, Bryce from Utah, who wrote in, is if I were to crash on this island before Knives Out comes out, I have to assume that because this person is still a working filmmaker, then a Blu-ray version of every movie they are going to make in the future, eventually one by one, just comes and parachutes into this island. People are not able to rescue me for some reason, but I am able to get special deliveries of one director's movies from their filmography. So that if sort of factors into my decision as well.
Rules. If this is in the rules, if that is a different question. If you could only watch one filmmaker's future films for the rest of your life, you could only pick one, I feel like that's a totally different question.
I mean, I don't know, Peter. I'm playing by a different set of rules over here. And then also, I think, look in that same mode of thinking in terms of trying to find loopholes and stuff. The question specifically says a specific set of Blu-rays from only one director's filmography. Rian Johnson also directed episodes of Terriers and Breaking Bad, which are 2 of my favorite shows. So if his TV work is included in a Blu-ray, that means that I get the box set of both of those shows. So that includes some TV in there as well. So I don't know.
I like your loopholing of this question, Ben.
I didn't expect Ben to be pulling the loopholes with this answer. This is interesting. Now with this loophole, Chris, do you want to change your pick, or are you still Scorsese?
I'd probably stick with Scorsese. Wait, what was the loophole? You're getting stuff dropped off, Lost?
Yeah, you get, I imagine it's like a FedEx package, in Castaway, where it's something just washed ashore, and then you have the latest Rian Johnson film.
Or in Lost, where they had the pallet drops.
Oh, yeah.
Big tubs of mayo.
Yeah, exactly.
But instead, it's just one Blu-ray of Knives Out.
One Bluray on a giant pallet. Yeah, I guess I want to know more about this island. Is it like the Lost Island? Like, is there a hatch? Is there a polar bear? Are the others lurking?
You do pretty well.
Yeah, I'd rather explore the island first before I sit down and watch some movies.
And the other thing that my wife brought up, because I posed this question to her right before I came on to join you guys, and she was like talking about those older directors that I mentioned, and she's like, maybe a lot of their movies aren't available on Blu-ray. So like, what happens there? And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. So maybe I know Rian Johnson's stuff is available on Blu-ray, so at least I'd have that. You know, if you're getting into the technicalities here, a specific set of Blu-rays, maybe some of their older stuff is only available on DVD or something like that. So you know, all these things you have to sort of factor in when you make your decisions.
One thing I like about your naming of all the older directors and their very storied filmography is that it sounded like you're trying to rebuild civilization. Like, if I was the last person on Earth, and there's like, I have to save cinema.
Yeah, there's
huge
such
George Cukor.
A huge range of stuff, because these guys were, you know, they're working in the studio system, and they were just like directors for hire, and they managed to make a bunch of stuff that sort of transcended what you think of to be, you know, like a journeyman style career. But yeah, there's so much like variation in their filmographies there. But anyway, that was my thought process.
We should do that question at another time. Like, if aliens came to Earth and you had to show them 5 films to represent all of humanity, what films would those be?
Ooh, geez, yeah.
Okay, next time. If you have a question for the mailbag, you can send it to peter@slashfilm.com, and please leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention the email on the air. You can find all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. And please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Years, because it has like 300 seasons, and you can just spend the rest of your life watching them.
Wait, so we can do TV shows?
Look, anything goes. We're trapped on an island with a magical Blu-ray player. I'm.
Yeah, you would just have to pick the director who directed the most episode of Cheers, because a lot of those shows had like 1 or 2 people that would just sort of like cycle in and out. And
that's right. I forgot the question was like directors. Yeah.
No, but it does bring up if
that rule that Ben made. Then you just pick one director that was on every season and get all the Blu-rays.
Yeah,
there we go.
But here's the question. I know HG's rewatching Lost. Would you really, like, if you got the choice to have Lost with you on this deserted island, would you really want to?
I don't know. That would be too close to home.
Yeah, I know.